blossom.
Oh,
One of the best things.
that's awesome.
As far as getting
It is C-Tech. Because I think I've seen it. Yeah.
You can do it, man. It was just seeds of.
I have. Somebody that just saw it. But not like, oh, that's
And that's why I do
the whale shark pattern. Is it? I'm getting the parrotfish next. It is. Yes, yeah, it is. Let's do some. No.
Hector, can you hear okay? Okay, all right.
You're just muted, Hector.
But I saw you not, thank you. We're just waiting on,
I can hear.
okay, good. We're just waiting on Clay now. There he is.
And what about, sorry, Kellerose and Emily? They were gonna zoom in the last I heard.
I sent, Kyla reached out to me today and asked for the link and I sent it to her. She did say she was gonna be driving though, so
Okay.
I wonder if that would be an issue and I haven't heard anything from Emily.
And I heard that secondhand, so I don't know.
I reached out to all of them.
So you can broadcast it on YouTube as well.
Yes.
Oh, maybe that's what they're watching.
Oh, they could be listening in on YouTube.
Yeah, and even, yeah, just listen.
And if not, they can access this later.
Yeah, and I'll do
Oh,
it.
you're gonna do it.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
great.
Too, because we have to kind of say we're all here. And
Okay, great.
So we will, yes, but that's all good. So we're good. We're starting. All right. Hi, Clay. We're gonna just go around the room and introduce ourselves, and then we'll have you introduce yourself along with Hector, introduce himself, and then Clay will have you go right in. But I wanted to say that we have something that we created here, kind of the town governance structure as compared to a business, which is a description of what the citizens, board of trustees, mayor and town administrator, what that role is. And we'll just talk about that later. But I just wanted you to know we had something, and you haven't seen this. It's just kind of a descriptor of explains our roles, et cetera. So with that, I will start with Cherie to have you introduce yourself, and then we'll do that around.
I'm Cherie Fisher. I am running for a town trustee position.
Hey.
I'm very excited.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
And then we'll just go, you go,
Trustee
Paige Smith, mayor.
Rick Stelter, Mayor Pro Tem.
Lucy Hunter, trustee.
I can't trustee wherever. Yeah.
Karen Tarno, trustee.
Go ahead, Hector.
Hector Majorado, Board of Trustee.
Okay, and then Clay, if you'll introduce yourself, and then we're gonna turn it over to you, unless anybody has any questions or anything else. Okay. Go ahead, Clay. You're on mute.
I'm trying to figure out how to get my screen sharing to work appropriately. But yeah, thank you guys. My name is Clay Bookner. I'm the town attorney. Oh gosh, how long have I been with Paonia now, guys? Couple of years, right?
Yeah.
So I've been around for a second, and I was asked to come this evening and give you guys kind of a best practices, onboarding sort of crash course, I guess you'd call it, and how different your roles are going to be going from citizen, civilian to trustee of a town, possibly becoming a member of local government. And so I've prepared this is like a CML blast, but curated presentation. And I'm going to try to share my screen so that you tell me, like, if you can see, the presentation, when it fills up the screen there.
These on.
You had it up a minute ago, but then you went back.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to share like a different I gotta share like. a
Sam, I
different
don't know if it would
screen.
help to have that screen on if that's possible, if it's
How's
shared.
that?
There we go, we got it.
There it
Oh.
is.
That
Yeah,
works.
now I gotta find my controls.
And,
It's really strange.
okay, Clay, we can see your PowerPoint. We're good.
Okay, well, I can't control my PowerPoint, so we're not quite there.
Uh-oh,
There.
Uh,
Rose just joined.
okay. Calla Rose, oh, good. Calla Rose, would you just go ahead and introduce yourself so we have you on the record? Thank you.
There we go. All right,
Oh, hang on, Clay.
okay.
And Calla Rose,
Here's.
can you hear us, but maybe not, don't have speaker? All right, I'll speak for you. This is Calla Rose Ostrander, who was also a candidate for trustee. And Calla Rose, once you get settled, and Hector too, I'll look for hands. Or you know what, this is a work session, so I feel like anybody should ask a question. Clay, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
people just
that's one of
asking
the,
questions.
yeah, when as I
as you
start,
go.
that was gonna be one of the first things I say is, look, as
Yeah.
I go, this is kind of dry stuff. So the more you interact and the more we talk, the better. That said, you know, this could be a 4-hour thing. So
Oh, yeah, we don't
I
want
would
that.
like to, be done, you know, for your sake, hit some of the highlights and then be done, you know, within an hour, hour and a half tops is what I would say.
Okay.
I mean, and so like I said, I mean, this is basically like an applying best practices sort of thing. I've been doing prosecution and general municipal law for small Colorado towns for over 8 years now. I've done presentations at CMLs. This is kind of my bailiwick. And so I've seen a couple strange things, and I'll include some anecdotes as we go. But this is kind of like a bullet point sort of presentation. I want you to read. I'm not going to read you the slide, but I am going to talk to the slide. And so as you go, just if you see something and you say, Clay, what the heck is that? Please feel free to interrupt, and I'll explain the best I can. There's often times where I'll get a question that I've never heard of, and that I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to research that for you. So it's endless possibilities with municipal law, which makes it really fun. But this is just kind of a broad overview. Okay. So one of the most important things that needs to happen is when you become an elected official, all of a sudden you go from citizen to trustee of a local government. You're an officer of a town, and everything kind of changes. Biggest part understanding is that, you know, you're part of a team, and I want to say you're still allowed, of course, to your a political opinion, etc. But a lot of times you give up a lot of your rights when you become a trustee, and you give up a lot of your First Amendment rights, which means that there's certain things that you want to be able to say and have opinion about, that because of a certain incident or circumstance or hearing, often you have to withhold your opinion until, you know, the appropriate time. And so some people have trouble with that, but, you know, opinion has been, as long as I've been there, has been very civil. And while there is differences in opinion, I think they're typically expressed very respectfully. So here's kind of a broad overview of that role change. I'm gonna do that so that I can get big here. There we go. So basically you're saying that what I'm going to do is uphold the Constitution and the town ordinances. So most of the time what I see here is that people will come in and think that, well, I don't like that rule, and so we're just not going to abide by it. But your oath is to uphold the rules as they exist and the ordinances as they exist. Of course, you can introduce changes to legislation, and you can convince your fellow trustees and a majority to change that legislation. But you kind of come in, and it is what it is at the time you arrive, and you can make it better, or you can, you know, throw wrenches in it. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. You're committing to a higher set of ethical boundaries that you didn't have before. There are certain things that you will be possibly conflicted out of with town business if you have a financial and or personal interest in it. And we'll discuss more about that. And then, of course, you know, you also become often a fly on the wall while people espouse their opinion that you might not agree with. And so you often will not have the opportunity to debate someone, even if you want to. And so you're just going to have to bring a lot of respect and patience with that. This is just another way I kind of, some people learn differently. And so I wanted to make a little picture slide for people of kind of what you're doing here. This also weaves in and out commissions. Like this I can give this same presentation to planning commission. So if you see somebody as like, it says commissioner and or trustee, it's the same idea. The most critical thing, of course, is recognizing that you have to protect the town's interests and assets. And so, you know, every time there's a contract or anytime somebody asks for something, whether it's a good idea or bad idea, in your opinion, you have to weigh that against what's the best interest of the town, because now you're thinking outside of yourself and thinking as a whole, what's best for the community. So some people come into office and, you know, one of the pitfalls that I see is that it's a single person that disagrees with everybody on the board, and they come into office and they want to overhaul the whole thing. They want to argue with everything, regardless of what it is, disagree, make their own motions with no seconds. And all that does really is disrupt. And what we call that in the industry is outsider mentality. You have to understand when you come to a local governing body like this, you're just one vote and the majority rules. And so, you know, you're either there to, that doesn't mean you have to agree with everybody. We often have dissenting voters, and that's what we want. We want live and opinionated discussion, but we want the people to understand that, be able to articulate why this is good for the town, not just, you know, this is against my personal agenda. This is more talking about the outsider perspective. This is something that you just have to understand that this is now a we. You're not going to get anything done as an individual. And I'll use just for example, Madam Mayor, and it's nothing personal. I'm just, the mayor seat is often misunderstood. While the mayor is the chairman of the board of trustees and often is given signatory authority and other things, the mayor only has the same vote that you do. And so
I don't vote.
oh, right.
I'm only a tiebreaker, but
That's
I don't
right.
vote
In
unless it's a
certain,
tie.
right, that's
Yeah.
that's specific to your town.
Right.
You
right.
guys have made
You
it
know.
such that the mayor does not vote unless
Yep.
it's a tiebreaker. So that's statutory, but the example still stands that, you know, some people think like, well, the mayor runs the town, and that's just not the case. You run the town, but you run the town as a board. So, you know, the idea, of course, then is like, don't be the one person swimming upstream. Try to grab a few fish and get them to swim with you. And you're allowed to do that. But, you know, we'll talk about how you can do that. You can't do that in meetings outside of the scheduled meetings and posted meetings if it's more than if it's 3 or more trustees. And so we'll talk about that as well. So you can't have a couple of trustees over to your house for pot stickers and discuss town business. So what do we want, and what is like the root, what are we actually going for here? What we're going to talk about a little later is your roles in employment and outside of your scope of employment. Even though you're not technically employed, the courts will use scope of employment. And so I start trying to weave that in a little bit here. You are technically employed now as a trustee. And so you have job duties, and these are your job duties. We want to protect, of course, the rights of our citizens. We always want to have open public hearings and debate. And we want to create stability for the people and the community that want to come visit and look at our or participate in town meetings and hearings. This is just a kind of a internal dialogue sort of slide if you want to just look at this. So basically what this is talking about is being respectful and understanding, and if there's one of the things to take away from this is there an imbalance of information? That means like somebody knows something more than you do at a trustee meeting. That's obviously means that there's something going on that's not transparent, just as an example. And typically we don't see like a specific split vote. Like I said, I've represented over a dozen towns and been to countless meetings. And I do feel like Paonia's discussion and balance is is done very well. There's respectful discussion and there is split votes. But typically there's a clear majority, and it's not always the same group of people. And so there is like a balanced, lively debate, and that's always good for your meetings. Like I promised, I know some people like pictures and can learn differently. And so this is just a different way to present some of the same information we've already talked about. One of the things that I see is sitting around and reacting to what somebody brings you rather than setting a mission and vision for the town and then going after that mission and vision proactively. That's a much better feel and momentum for a board and for staff especially than to constantly just be trying to put out fires that other people bring to them. Understand that you were voted in and or appointed to be a trustee and you represent the town, but that doesn't mean that everybody that files a complaint becomes the priority for the entire local government and staff. It's better to have a vision and try to fulfill that vision through action. And there's obviously just some more pitfalls here. If anybody doesn't have any question on any of these pitfalls, I'm going to go to the next slide.
I'm wondering, would it be helpful for people to have a copy of these slides for after this meeting?
That would be helpful.
I mean, it seems like it might be,
Possible.
yeah.
I'm more than happy to provide those.
Okay, if you'll email them to Sam, if you're okay with that, and then you can share them and people
Sure.
can use them or not. Okay.
Thank you. That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Rose gave a thumbs up.
Oh, good.
She's excited.
Excellent, because I know there's a lot here and I can't read it, but
Yeah.
and it's nice to be able to digest it on your own too.
I agree.
Okay, thanks, Clay.
Can you not, is the screen not big enough for you guys to see in?
I can see when you have this, like this,
Okay,
with
but
the
the
big
little
font,
things are tough.
but those.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have them. It just means I can't read them.
Right, no, that's okay. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is that scope of employment, like I talked about. As trustees, you are giving a lot of latitude and you're covered by the Colorado Government Immunity Act. This what we'll see CGI. You'll hear CGIA a lot more now for the new trustees than you ever did before. And that's because it gives you personal protection from liability. So if you're acting in your capacity and you are personally sued for a decision that you've made as a local government trustee, you are protected under the CGI, meaning nobody can bring a tort action against you for something that you did as a trustee. Now that said, you have to be acting within the scope of your employment, and I mentioned that earlier, and not acting, willfully and wantonly, and I'll explain what that means. So everybody is covered under their scope of employment. However, if you act outside your scope of employment, then that's where you could become personally liable for a decision you make, even or something that you do while a trustee. And so you have to understand very clearly your scope of employment and what your job description is. Staff members have written job descriptions. Trustees will go through yours. And basically the trustees do, act in the capacity of a trust, and I'll explain what you don't do. It's easier to explain what you don't do, what you shouldn't do, than what you should do, because it's a lot cleaner that way and shorter. So basically you want to be covered by the CGIA, because if you do something that's outside your scope of employment, you violate a rule or law, or break it. Sometimes it can be an ethical thing. Sometimes it's a personal decision. Then that it could result in personal liability, meaning somebody could name you individually in a lawsuit and you're no longer covered by CGIA. And believe me, there are incredible cases out there, and a lot of just even mediocre cases, meaning financially, where people get in trouble and they're held to punitive consequence. And so you don't want to be in the situation where you've ruined some sort of development or rezone for a business, and they sue you individually and recoup the amount of the projected development income or whatever it may be, because it could be in the millions, and you obviously don't want to be in that position. However,
Like,
if you're at,
could you just could you just give us an example of what that means? Like, what would I have to have done in order to be personally liable? Give me an example of how I would have messed up.
Well, I can go through. I'll give you an example of a case where there was a application for a rezoning and development, and the individual was working outside of the scope of their employment by going to and visiting the construction site where the rezone would occur, and then eventually where the development was going to take place. And they were gathering and using information to try to circumvent the progression of that particular development, and the developers found out, and they were awaiting a public hearing on an application that they had submitted for a building permit, and that person basically used inside information that they gathered from a personal investigation at a public hearing, when they should have, which was considered ex parte knowledge and communication. And I'm going to get to that, but I'm giving you an example for to answer the question. But they were held responsible for ex parte communications, and were sued individually. CGIA didn't cover them, and they ended up having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages for this developer to have to go back and apply and submit the application and permit without that individual or that trustee there.
So the trustee took it upon themselves to try to circumvent that particular
That process.
process from going on, and did not recuse themselves, and were part, in this case, of the planning commission, and were bringing up poison pills at the hearing that were things only they would know.
Yeah, they
So that
use
was the ex
information
parte.
outside the scope of the public hearing, and argued that information, and at that particular hearing, got that particular development tabled, as I recall. I mean, it's very convoluted. It's a large development, and
Yeah.
of course, I'm giving you the scariest examples possible. But just so you're aware, they're out there, and if you've done something willful or wanton, and which is what was determined by this person, then you could end up paying not only the out-of-pocket damages to the plaintiff in that case, but possibly punitive damages as well, where they'll double or triple the damages that you would owe them.
Clay, just what specifically in that example was the ex parte communication?
Visiting multiple visits to the development, to the side of the development.
Okay.
And that's problematic because it was public hearing and quasi judicial in nature.
Yes, and I'm going to get to all that. You're way ahead, but yes. I have a whole slide on quasi judicial and some examples and stuff like that. This is just the be forewarned, be scared, be good. So just understand, if you're outside the scope, that's when you might end up finding, meaning needing to defend yourself versus being covered by the CGIA. So some people think like, whoa, I'm a trustee now. I'm no longer liable to lawsuits, and that's just not the case. You have to be acting within your job description, and following the rules as I will lay out for you.
Just one quick thing, if we find ourselves in a situation where we have choices like that, are we as trustees able to reach out to Clay to get clarification
No,
on what we should or shouldn't do, or how do
you,
we
right
operate?
now, no trustee can go directly to Clay.
Okay,
You have to go through staff. So I would suggest you go to staff.
yeah.
So
But
Lucy's
let me,
most
and
recent-
I'll caveat that. Oh, Stefan, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so Lucy's most recent recusal, she came to my office, we called Clay. And he determined, hey, yep, you should probably recuse yourself. And so that's the kind of situation that we ask.
Okay,
And that's not because the trustees, at least this is from my foxhole, that's not because the trustees aren't trusted in their positions. It's because if I was fielding phone calls from every individual trustee, it could become a lot very quickly.
Yeah.
gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, so just remember, you need to be within the scope of your employment. You act as a body, and remember that you write laws and you're policymakers. If you find yourself in the weeds doing what typically should be staff work, something's probably wrong, and not per se outside your scope of employment, because there's certain things that are designated to trustees, such as signatory authority, some decision-making authority, and say like ex officio members on other commissions. However, just understand that your job is to primarily is to legislate, and then secondarily to conduct public hearings as needed. And we'll talk about that when you switch from a legislative body to a quasi judicial body. It can get very complicated quickly, and that's why we have scripts and things like that to go through these things and do it the right way. Any questions on this slide? Okay.
Clay,
Yes, sir.
that, I'm taking that as a council member, we not attend community meetings or functions that there is an issue that's gonna come before the board. That we're gonna vote on, or we're gonna have a quasi judicial hearing on. That we avoid going to those where we would be informed with something which basically is ex parte communication that is not in the testimony in a quasi judicial meeting or before the town votes on an issue. Is
Right.
that-
Yeah, that's mostly accurate. I'll go through some of the examples of what is actually, what is quasi judicial in nature, then what are things that aren't necessarily quasi judicial, but are just a good idea to stay away from. The idea being that you don't, I mean, especially any matter on an agenda that's going to be a public hearing, you don't want to be advocating or participating in advocacy groups, prior to attending that public hearing, because you've basically just conflicted yourself out of it. You are supposed to be a objective decision-making body, and obviously you can't be completely unaware of things that are happening in such a small town, but there are certain things you just shouldn't proactively do. And I'll get into some better examples of that. But for the most part, that is true. There are certain community events, of course, that you can attend, and in fact, there's certain commissions and committees that that are tasked with, say, querying the community and proposing certain agenda items, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't go to those, but there are certain things that you can't, and I'll kind of explain that in more detail in a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, remember it's the we, not I. If you're acting alone ever or outside of the scope of, or if you're acting outside of or doing something that isn't going to be on the agenda, or you're doing something that's on the agenda but you haven't talked about as a body, or taking some sort of individual action, that's when you have to really be careful and say, wait, what am I doing? Has the board made a decision as a body to take action on this item or do something? And have I been tasked to be the liaison and or action officer or whatever, on that particular item? If you find yourself acting alone on something that the board hasn't decided on as together, that's when, you could be technically in that willful wanton category. Once you've voted on a decision, even if you've lost the vote, this is another way that you can make a problem for yourself. If the board votes as a majority, whether you voted nay or not on an action item, and you take it upon yourself to intervene or try to undermine whatever action the board voted on to take, you are outside the scope of your employment. So we want vigorous, respectful debate during meetings, but after the board has cast their vote, that's the decision of the board, and you're a member of that board. And so anything you do against that decision, now nobody's saying you have to be happy about losing, but you can't intentionally undermine or try to devalue the board's decision in the eyes of the public, or physically do something or take something into your own hands. That would be outside the scope of your employment. You could be removed from the board for doing that. And then also recognize that you could, like my development example, if the board had voted to rezone an area and there were some preparations ongoing for that development where a permit had been submitted, and that was where the person decided that, look, I lost a vote, I didn't want the rezone, I don't want this thing here, I'm going to go out to this location, take pictures and figure out a way to try to stop this proposal and the building permit from going through, whatever it was. That's kind of those decisions that can't be undone without liability, because the next decision that was made, if you make it and you've done something to undermine it, or you're a problem, then they're entitled to a whole new hearing. And if they've put any money into that hearing and it's determined that someone acted outside of their scope or willfully or wantonly, that they can recover whatever money it costs. And often even just an architect, as many of you know out there, or a contractor, just to design your house or design a commercial building could be tens of thousands of dollars just to get the blueprint. And if something is done to undermine that proposal, then you could be on the hook for the value of that. I've already kind of talked to all these, and you guys have been asking some good questions, so we kind of did this. One thing you just need to understand is that it's okay to represent a certain idea or group of people, but it's not okay to just be a boat on the ocean of somebody else's political agenda. And just keep in mind, that stuff comes out pretty quick, because you're just one of many trustees. And it becomes very apparent when a trustee has a personal agenda that they're trying to move across the line. Okay. We know what I kind of hinted at this. The mayor is a chair, or the chair of a commission is the chair, but that doesn't mean they're the end all be all. In our case, you know, the mayor doesn't even get a vote unless it's a tiebreaker, but they are in charge of affirmatively controlling the meeting and making sure that we stick to the agenda. That's not just because the chair doesn't want to address decisions, but they've taken an oath to fulfill that role. And there are requirements for the agenda, as an example, where they have to be published and noticed, and we can't just start talking about any old thing that's brought up, say during public comment. So some people, new trustees and some community members, don't understand that and don't like it. They want to show up and have a, you know, long debate about something that isn't on the agenda, and then they want to blame often the chair for shutting that down, but it's the chair doing the right thing because that's what the statute requires. And Madam Mayor, apologize, these are the ones you can't read, but it's just more about the chair. You can look at that in your personal time. Okay, now we're to more of the good stuff. So we're going to talk about public hearings. Basically, these public hearings is anytime we conduct and take testimony in public. So there are many presentations and or decisions that have to be made that have to be noticed and conducted as a public hearing. And obviously, you know, this is where we're going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty. This is where citizens and or affected parties get their due process. And so you don't have to memorize this or anything, but that's why I create, and with help from staff, of course, we create scripts, and we make sure that the chairperson and or the mayor, depending on if it's a commission or in the trust, reads the script and makes sure that we follow and allow for that due process to take place. We don't argue during other people's testimony and or presentation in a public hearing. It's not an open debate. These are times where there's presentations, there's staff reports, there's trustee discussion, there's sometimes, depending on the type of hearing, there can be response from interested parties, and then there's the ability for community members to speak, and then there's deliberation and decision making. And so this is just public hearing. We're not even too quasi judicial. So, but typically all quasi judicial actions are public hearings, but not all public hearings are quasi judicial functions. So just keep that in mind. And of course, if you ever have a question, staff or I can answer that. And we're not just kind of willy-nilly going into our meetings. There's a lot of preparation for any given meeting. Often that's pretty much what staff does. You know, they enact or they take action on board direction, but they're often, you know, preparing agenda items and or bringing status of certain action items for the meeting. And so those 2-3 hour meetings that we have every 2 weeks, you know, there's 20-30 hours every week that goes into those meetings. And so just understand there's a lot behind the scenes to make those seem to run smoothly. And it's because the staff was working hard to make that happen. So this is just kind of a do and don't during public speaking. I kind of touched on this already. You're not there to like berate or debate someone, even if you vehemently disagree with them. Just let them say what they need to say and be objective. You could also end up doing something where you're in a public hearing and you ask the person a question that makes it obvious that you've already made up your mind about the decision. And when you go into a public hearing, the idea is that you're an objective party, and you haven't made up your mind yet because you have not heard the public's viewpoint, and you haven't heard the presenter, and you haven't heard any interested party response. And so there's no way you could have made a decision. And if you telegraph that you've made a decision by a question and or by arguing with someone, you could undermine the entire process and or conflict yourself out of being a part of that process. Okay, quasi-judicial. So we're getting into some more specifics here where we start talking about the actual quasi-judicial functions. Basically anything that, a good way to think about it is most stuff that has to do with real property is where we end up in quasi judicial actions. So special use permitting for a property, rezoning, variances, PD, site plans, all this stuff. These are, you will step into the role of a like a court, and you're acting more as judges than you are as legislators. And one of the things that often, well, we always will prepare a packet for the trustees. And typically I give a quick brief at the outset of any quasi judicial function, and or brief the trustees, just as, you know, reminder, this is a quasi judicial function. And staff will also send out a notification that, hey, we received this application for this. This is a quasi judicial function. This means that you're not to speak and or talk to any of the interested parties for this application. I will be present during these hearings or these actions, and we'll follow informal rules of evidence, because due process does matter, and because there are statutes, although they may seem kind of vague, that allow for causes of action to be brought against the town if somebody believes that the proper due process and or rules were not followed during a quasi judicial action. And this is where we get into that ex parte. And of course, I already kind of touched on prejudgment, but I'm going to kind of expound on ex parte contacts as well.
But to the point, quasi judicial means we're deciding whether or not something fits within our existing laws and ordinances, correct?
It can be, yes, or it can just be, it can be a decision that does fit, but that's up to you as a board to decide. So for example, like a rezoning, the statute and our code allows for rezoning, but that doesn't mean you have to. So it's not always like, does this fit or does it not? You can also decide that it doesn't fit and allow it anyway. As the board of trustees, you have an enormous amount of power to circumvent existing laws based on not all, I shouldn't say like that. You have the ability to circumvent existing building requirements, for example, through a variance without actually changing the law. And there's obviously boundaries to that, but it could be anything. And so it's not always just deciding, does this fit or does it not? Sometimes you're just deciding, oh, it does fit, but do we want it? Or it doesn't fit, but should we allow it? And so you have just the whole spectrum of decisions that you could be making.
Can I give a quick example that was really sticky for us? And it's really, if you don't mind, we had a woman here in town who bought a piece of property and it had been zoned commercial. And she came to the planning commission asking if she could turn it into a short-term rental. Problem was, we didn't have any ability to approve a short-term rental because our code said you can't rent for less than 30 days. So there was no way for the commission to approve a short-term rental because we didn't have any place to put it. And it came to the trustees. I believe the commission, I think said
Made
no.
no recommendation.
Had no recommendation, that's what it was. And then it came to the trustees, and those of you that were here, remember it was just a very sticky thing, but we didn't feel like we had the ability to directly tell her she could have a short-term rental because we had no short-term rental in our code. And it would violate the way the code was written at that point. So she was denied her request for a short-term rental. So that's just an example of the kind of twisted things we get.
Yay.
Thanks, Clay.
Yeah, and I guarantee you, while you're a trustee, you will see something that no other trustee has seen before, and that often I haven't seen before, and we have to be able to apply a process. Otherwise, we'll just be it would just be like, well, I guess we'll just do it this way. And we owe the community more than making decisions on a whim. It has to be done through a process, and this is often that process. So there are rules of evidence. I already kind of explained that. and I would explain all this again at the hearing. And you can of course ask me, what sort of weight, if any, you should give something, or is this hearsay? But at the end of the day, you're allowed to consider all relevant testimony and evidence, and basically you get to decide that. So as an example, like hearsay isn't allowed in a criminal court, but it certainly is allowed with whatever weight you give it in a quasi-judicial matter. And I would kind of give you kind of a rundown with a little more legalese during a quasi-judicial function, just as to how much weight it might carry and or how attenuated the hearsay is. Is it hearsay within hearsay? Are there exceptions? Whatever. And then you would get to decide whether or not, how much weight to give it. Ex parte, everybody's favorite. This is one of those things where some trustees have trouble believing that this is actually a thing. I became a trustee because I have all these great ideas, and I'm going to go talk to the people that support my ideas, and I'm going to get all these things done. Well, it depends. You can do that certainly, but there are certain things where you cannot have contact with interested parties and or applicants and or other trustees outside of a public hearing. And that's when someone, and so I'll just, you read the definition there. After something has been filed where it is an agenda item and the staff will make you aware of that, that's when the ex parte contacts exclusion rule comes into play. It's always okay to reach out to me. And the reason
Through the staff.
Go ahead, ma'am.
I said through the staff,
Yes.
not
yes,
directly
yes,
you.
Right.
And
I'll just tell you this: if you're a trustee and you come to the staff with a question that they can't answer and or something that needs, you will get a hold of me pretty much at that time, unless I'm in court, and then I will call you, or we will set a meeting. Typically I would say within 24 hours. Is that fair, Stefan?
Yeah.
Or is that about right? I mean, I'm sure there's times it's been longer, but you will get your question answered within 24 hours typically. A lot of times Stefan will call me, if there's a trustee or with a trustee, and I'm available at that moment, and I will pick up and talk to you.
And just Clay, we're under the quasi judicial umbrella in this part of the discussion, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, this is ex parte. Yes, I'm talking about quasi judicial, but ex parte contacts often can also, you can also ruin like a public hearing with an ex parte contact, depending on what the public hearing is about. If you already know it's on the agenda and you are out there having contacts with the person that's applying or submitting something that is going to be the matter of a public hearing, and you make up your mind about it beforehand through ex parte contacts, it's the same sort of idea. That's why it's not like, oh, this only matters for quasi judicial. This only matters for public hearings. Remember, all quasi judicial functions are public hearings, but not all public hearings are quasi judicial. But you should never have ex parte contacts with either. Okay. So I do this, the site visit, whatever. The other thing is if there is going to be a quasi judicial function and say you're contacting staff outside of a public hearing to try to get information before the public hearing, and or doing your own personal investigation into a site, or talking to one of either the applicant or a interested respondent in a matter that's against the application. These are all things that should not be happening before a quasi judicial matter and or a public hearing. So like if somebody's sending you an email and say, hey, check out my blueprint for this. This is what I submitted to staff in order to get this rezoned. Don't you think this is going to be a great plan? You should really see this. I need you to advocate to try to pass this permit application I submitted for this. Those are all things where you just have to be very careful. That's not your job. Your job is to look at the entire thing, and you might very well like it, and you can let that person bring that to your attention at the public hearing. Prejudgment and bias. This is a very tough one because we all have our judgments and we all have our bias, and it's really hard to get rid of those. And there's certain things that the trustees who do this well understand by what they look around the room and know that everybody has a bit of a judgment and bias, but they don't wear it on their sleeve. And this is different than talking outside of the thing. This is an actual, like, if you demonstrate that you're already had made your mind up, either by the type of questions you made or by arguing with someone, or you make it obvious during a meeting that you're not objective, open-minded about the application, whatever that may be, you could get, you could undermine the whole thing by having a prejudgment and or bias. So for example, you're an architect, and I'm sorry if there's any architects on the board. I don't know if there is. But if there's an architect on the board and another architect brings their blueprint and have submitted this blueprint at a public hearing to be accepted, so they can begin construction on a house or commercial building, and you say, I would never, yes, I understand that this meets code, but this is so poorly done and it's the worst blueprint I've ever seen, and there's so many problems with the roof line, and it's ugly, and it's just subpar work in my professional opinion, I vote no. Well, that's not a thing. You just demonstrated bias and conflicted yourself out and possibly undermined the entire process, which means that person has to start over, which might have cost them money and time, and which might leave you outside the scope of your employment, which might leave you personally liable for that decision. Okay. At the end of the day, what we're trying to get to with these things is a supportable, reasonable, and defendable position. So you will always have, we give proposed language and staff actions and at the end of hearings that would say, here you can either move to approve, you can either move to approve with this condition, or you can deny, or you can say, we need more information, we're going to table this and take this up at a future time. Once you've come to a decision, we typically will make these major findings, and almost everything that we talked about in the quasi-judicial realm is going to be done in some sort of written finding where we're going to clearly state what we decided, why we decided it, and the fact that, and who we heard from before we made those decisions. And then we bring that, we'll typically, bring that, depending on what sort of action it is, we can always finalize and adopt the findings at the next meeting. That doesn't mean that the findings didn't occur when you make the decision. It just means you will often be able to review and then adopt those findings. Let's talk about motions real quick. I think we're still under, Stefan, we're still under Robert's rules, right? Have I convinced you guys to go to Bob's rules yet?
No, we're still in Roberts.
Okay. So, and that's okay. A lot of my towns over the years, I've tried to convince them just adopt the Bob's rules versus Robert's rules. I'm familiar with both. Bob's is just kind of a simplified version. In any event, you have to understand that once you walk into a meeting, the fun, long, pretentious word for it is parliamentarianism. And so you have to understand that you are bound by certain rules and conditions. And so it may look weird to outsiders, but something might go down like this. I motion that we vote yes on this. I second. Discussion. Yeah, well, I don't think we should I think we should motion with a condition. I don't really like that motion. What do you think? Oh yeah, I don't think that either. Consensus is made that they don't like the original motion and second. And then somebody tries to make another motion with a second on the table, and then you pass that motion. Technically, someone could come back and challenge that action and say that was an inappropriate action, and this has to go back to the board for decision, and they'd be correct. The way that you have to do that, and this is just one of many examples, is you have to withdraw your second, withdraw your motion, and then recreate or restate the motion with the condition. And so these are just one of many things that I'm trying to point you towards. So I don't want you to get hung up on it. That's not your job to know every in and out, but it is your job to understand that if somebody stops and asks you to do something strange, it's probably because you're not following the proper rule. So this is just one example. I just want to, I point to things. You can't make a motion that has nothing to do with what the agenda item is, which you'd be surprised. And then you'd have, failed motions or tied motions. Then, it's basically if the motion fails, it doesn't just sit there because now you have nothing, right? Then you need to make a motion in the opposite and or make a motion with a condition. If a motion just completely fails or ties, or in your case, that doesn't happen because, or it shouldn't happen because of the tiebreaker rule that you guys have adopted. And we don't have anything on file that I'm aware of that means that that our code, that failure to pass means a assertive denial. This is just one example. Then you would need to, just vote with a condition and or vote to, deny whatever it is that somebody's trying to pass or get you to do.
The motion fails, it just fails, doesn't it? You don't have to withdraw the motion.
No, right, it just fails.
We did this last time.
Yeah, if there's no
Oh,
second.
There was a
if there-
motion that was seconded and then we had discussion
Draw.
and we revised it.
We had to withdraw the second and the
The
motion.
second got withdrawn.
Right.
Right,
Yep.
So it started with a clean slate,
yeah.
but it had.
And I believe I interceded and said, oh no, you just, and that's what we'll do. If I don't do it, sometimes Sam will do it, or if somebody sees it or stuff, like I miss stuff too, but you're what I'm trying. Yeah. You're not just sitting there in a vacuum like, oh wait, did I do this right? And if you don't know, just ask like, hey, I know that there's, I'm no parliamentarian, and you can say that, and then then you sound smart, and then you say what then you can say that you don't know something, but you still sound smart. So, don't ever hesitate to ask in those situations, because it's way easier to do that at the moment than to have to wait 2 weeks, put it back on the board, and then unwind it.
And Clay, we would never let that happen at a meeting because we have Sam, who's our parliamentarian.
Yes.
And then there's me, who's not gonna be afraid to say, wait a minute, what? Are we doing this right, Sam? What should we do? So
Knows the finer things that I haven't learned yet. So between the two of us, we can usually get you through pretty safely.
yeah, because I don't know that, well, anyway, there should never say never that there isn't something so complicated that we blow it, but we tend, just for Cherie, who, is new, we don't usually leave things dangling. We try to get it decided what to do with it. So if a motion fails, there's more discussion usually in the new motion on that item.
I was gonna say Robert's Rules actually has a process for you guys to all chill out for a minute while the parliamentarian finds the exact
Yeah.
question or the exact answer as well. So it basis.
So, yeah, all right, thanks, Clay.
Thank you.
Okay, so understand also your role and its limits. One thing that I see happen is planning commission and or the board can get really frustrated because the applicant applies for something, but it's not like it's not really the right thing. But it's not your job to be the applicant. And so if it's a site plan, then we're not talking about use. If it's like a rezone, then we're not talking about the site plan. And if they're asked the totally wrong thing and you're going through the process, and they're like, man, we requested to vote rezone for a C1, and they have an application following right behind it for something that can't even be built in C1, it's not your job to say, well, we understand what you meant to do was rezone into C2, and so we're gonna pass that. So you can't do that. You have to look at what's been applied for, and vote on that. It's really hard sometimes when you see something or somebody make a mistake that's going to cost them a lot of time and frustration to not just try to fix it for them, but just understand that you just need to stay within your role and the limits of what's been put in front of you. Even if you know better, this happens sometimes. This doesn't obviously count in variances. If somebody submits a variance application, then they're asking for you to do something that is outside of the code and they already understand that. Okay. Okay, this is just like a role thing. So, sometimes the planning commission gets a little ahead of themselves. Sometimes they want to fix the application, but that's not their job. Understand that you have other people, other commissions and boards as well. Boards of adjustment can make certain decisions at their level. And there's also the orange box is something that I try to tell every town goes through this, where somebody submits an application and 10 people from the subdivision show up and say they can't even do that, application is illegal because it's against our HOA, and the board says, oh, let me see the bylaws of this HOA and the rules, restrictions, and see what's going on. Oh yeah, this is against the HOA covenants. The CCR say you can't have a 2-story with a gable roof, and so that's what this is, and so we're going to deny this application. That's completely out of your scope. If the building code allows 2 stories with a gable, then you're looking to approve it as long as it fits the code and guidelines. It's up to the HOA as a private, basically, private enforcer to stop the applicants building the house, not the board of trustees. And that's a sticky point. I see it once a year, probably. Any questions on that? Okay. We're almost there. 3 more slides. This is just a couple ethical statutes. Instead of me telling you it's bad, I just want you to read the actual law. This is in statute. The one that I see is often is a substantial financial interest per se. The other issue becomes if you have a personal interest. Now, it doesn't have to mean that your personal interest could be against the thing and you can vote for it. It doesn't really matter it doesn't matter what side you land on. It matters that you had a personal or the appearance even of a personal interest, wherein your bias or prejudice could be called into question for that process, because if somebody could prove that you were biased, prejudiced, and or had a personal or financial interest in something that you voted on, they can undo the vote whether you voted for or against your bias. And so just understand that the ethics and conflicts of interest is very important, and that's where you see trustees step in it. Any questions on this?
Yeah, Clay, could you provide some examples of personal interest? The financial is kind of obvious, but
Sure.
I gather that personal can cover a few bases probably.
Yeah, so I'll try to think of one that is an actual. Okay, you're no, that's more financial. You're a pilot.
Hey Clay, can I give you an easy one?
Oh, please. Yeah, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's say you serve on a nonprofit board of directors that has business before the town, and you're also a board of trustees. Can you run with that?
I was gonna ask something similar.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think you can. That's So that would be a good example where there's not well, I mean, here's the thing though, with nonprofit, people automatically say, well, there's no financial interest, but often nonprofits do have financial interest. They just don't take a profit, but individuals within that nonprofit could financially benefit. So that's not always like, no way, that's not a financial, but that is a good example of even if you aren't getting paid, but your nonprofit could benefit from something, and you're sitting on a decision that could benefit your nonprofit, you definitely would be conflicted. My example is if you had a municipal airport and you're a pilot, and you would get no financial interest whatsoever in some improvement to the airport, but you benefit from it personally, and you personally want to see it happen because it's your hobby, or it's some part of your lifestyle. So often we'll see just like weird things, like somebody who is a lifetime gardener and is in, like, the Gardener of the Year magazine, and they are in front of the town, and somebody brings forward the idea to turn half of the public park into a community garden. That could be something where it's like, well, there's really no public interest or financial interest at all, but you might have a great personal interest in making that a community garden because gardening is your favorite thing in the world, and you were on the cover of Gardening magazine. And that's the sort of thing where it could get sticky real quick because you might have an obvious bias to pass something like that. So just understand, like, these are one of those things where I will often talk to a trustee, and I'll just say, are you objective here? Do you have an interest in this? And if you don't have to answer me, and I can't, and me or nor staff nor anybody can make you recuse themselves. We can make it very uncomfortable for you, but if there was like an obvious personal or substantial financial interest, I would have to state on the record, my opinion if I was asked, and then that makes you look biased. Then it just basically force recuses you in a very public manner, which we have never done, and we strive not to do. But the bottom line is, you can say, no, I have no personal interest in this, and go through a decision-making process, and then it might come to light later that you did. And that whole process would have to be undone, and you could be subject to whatever financial damages that caused the applicant. I know it sounds crazy, but there's a lot of examples out there. Any more questions on that? This is often one where we get stuck for a second.
I guess I could be a gardener, but still be thinking about my decision in terms of what's best for the community.
Of course. Yes,
And
of
as
course you can.
long as that's my motivation and I can defend that, and even though I think what's best for the community is to have more gardens.
That's right. And so, one thing I tell people is, and when I make some examples, I kind of do it very generically to kind of give people an easier way to connect versus some sort of, if I do like a very specific example, in this case, what I see people do a lot is say, oh, well, that would never happen to me. Like that's like a weird specific thing. I get, okay, that's not going to happen. But if I give a very generic example, at least forces you to think. And then what I often get that exact question, and my response is typically, just because you own a house doesn't mean you can't vote on somebody doing a rezoning. Just because you own a business doesn't mean you can't vote on something that has to do with business. Does that make sense? Just because you drive on the streets doesn't mean you can't vote on a road project. It has to be a direct, like a personal interest that affects your objectivity.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. Now, if it's your neighbor trying to add a third floor to their house that blocks a view of your mountains, then you might have to recuse yourself. Okay.
That's the example I was thinking of. Not that that's happening. Yeah.
No, all neighbors get along all the time.
Yeah.
So we kind of already talked about all this. This is just kind of a bullet form of what we talked about. if you do have a conflict of interest, the best thing to do is you say, you don't have to just say why, you just need to disclose. I have a I have a conflict in this matter. I'm going to step out. It says step down, which means not vote, but the best course of action here and the best practice is to leave the room. Don't be a part of don't stay in the room. There is a case where a trustee was determined to have still undermined due process by staying in the room and giving mean glances to speakers and to trustees during the process. So the best idea is to just leave the room. If you have a conflict, leave the room. And then people just call you back when it's over. I mean, it's just one of those things where in a small community, every once in a while, you're just like, oh, yeah, this is something I can't vote on. And that's that. There's no shame in it. In fact, it shows transparency. It shows candor. It shows wisdom. And I think you'd be surprised how much more trust and support you get from somebody who steps down at the appearance or especially obvious, but even at the appearance of certain conflicts, how the reputation for the board and for that individual grows in the town versus somebody who's like, everybody knows that person hates that applicant and there's some or that everybody knows that's that person's neighbor and they don't want this to happen. Those are the sorts of things that really can undermine the reputation and the authority of a board. And then you're just fighting people tooth and nail through every meeting if they don't trust you that you're going to make the right decision.
And I wanted to add that we have times when we have a quorum, but it's a thin quorum, we only have enough members. And I just want to point out that if something comes up and a quorum is 4, right? And we only have 4 members, and then one of those 4 says, I have a conflict of interest. I just want to make it clear, do not ever feel like you can't bring up that conflict of interest. Because if it turns out you do, then that particular agenda item would be tabled. It would just not get done that meeting. But I wouldn't want people to feel like because they are making the quorum that they don't want to bring up that they may have a conflict.
Right, and especially because any decision made could be, it would be really hard to defend and could be brought up by any party for or against it and to overturn it.
Yeah.
I've
So-
actually seen instances where people have disclosed a conflict or something they felt was it and it was a thin quorum. And the town attorney asked them questions during that thing right there and ultimately said, if you want to step down because it makes you more comfortable, that's fine. But I think that it's less of a conflict than you think. And if you can vote objectively, then since you've disclosed this, you can. So you never know how that one may turn out.
Yeah, so I guess never hesitate if you have any feeling in your gut, you may have a conflict. It's fine to bring it up. And then we have our attorney and it can be discussed and decided whether you do or not. Because we've had situations where trustees or the planning commission brought up a potential conflict and ultimately didn't really seem to be one. But I think it's always better to err on the side of being cautious about identifying where you may have a conflict.
Yeah, if it hits your radar, it's going to hit somebody else's radar. And you want to be able to go in and say, I spoke with the town attorney and this is my situation. And then they say, there's no conflict of interest here and here's why, or they ask me to speak on it, to articulate what reason that person thought they might have had a conflict, and I explained it, but I can explain why they don't. And so definitely one of the issues that comes up. I mean, remember in all of this, like the big takeaways are, it's okay to have personal opinions, but don't be an outsider once you're on the board. You're not going to get anything done on your own. Understand that there are very specific rules that you have to abide by, and you give up a lot of your, you give up, for example, like you just give up a lot of your free speech rights. You give up a lot of your freedom of movement rights, depending on what sort of events are taking place and for what reasons. I mean, you really have to be careful once a public hearing, and especially quasi judicial matter, gets put on the agenda, be proactive in staying away from conflicting yourself out of those. And then I just, be mindful of your ethical requirements as you journey through the adventure of being a trustee. I think, being a trustee in a local government's got to be one of the most fun volunteer things you could do in a community. It's just and incredibly important. I mean, you're running the town. The staff does a lot of the work, but you're making legislative decisions for the town, just like state does for state legislature, and federal legislature does for the state and the entire country. So you're just, you're a piece of that infrastructure, and it's an incredibly fulfilling job, I think. And I'm here for any questions you guys have.
I was just gonna say it's a testimonial for the people that have decided to run again, because I mean, it takes time, reading the packet. But I've been now 4 years as a trustee or mayor, and it's really rewarding. We really help a town that can make some really important decisions. It's not always pretty, it's not always clean, but the one thing, because I was a trustee before and now I'm mayor, one of the things that I think the trustees that have been around for a while can attest, that working with the staff, we try to make sure the agenda packet has as much information as we know, we being the staff and myself, so that the agenda packet has what you need to make a decision. Sometimes you may not necessarily have to read it all, and I shouldn't say that. Sometimes we have the proposals for a contract, and there will be 10 proposals. But I don't read them all, I have to say, but the staff rates them. So I always look at what the staff has rated. What's that?
I said we read them all.
Yeah, they read them all. We really have to put some trust in the staff, but the staff and I work really well together to make sure there's as much information, and there's a staff report with a recommendation for a motion. So it used to be you made up your motions on the spot, and that was really difficult, but we've made it so it's clear. But that doesn't mean you can't ask questions.
It's not just staff reviewing. Sometimes when there's a trustee that has specialized knowledge, and because of their professional field, we ask them to review RFQs. Trustee Hunter's one of them because she's an engineer.
Yeah.
And so she'll be on that, she'd be on that school committee.
That makes sense.
We have a lot of risk and liability when it comes to stuff too as staff, so we're just as interested in touching base with the town attorney and things like that, with making sure that we're making the right decisions and putting forth the right information too, because we're culpable in court too if we do something willful or malicious. We can, so we have to do the same things you guys kind of have to do, which is like, I'm not sure about this one, I'm gonna touch base with Clay, or, so we have some skin in the game too, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I do have a question, and a specific example being the Twin Lakes property decision. So the staff report was really robust and informative, but as you could probably assume from my numerous questions at the hearing last week.
And it wasn't a hearing.
What?
It was not a hearing.
Right.
Agenda.
Yeah,
It was just an agenda item.
right.
I just want to make it clear because there's a difference.
Yeah. So, even though I got a lot of information from that, it's like I still wanted to chew on it a little bit or something, and therefore I had a number of these questions, and it got me to thinking afterwards, and also kind of, considering some of the public response to the decision. It's like, is that a situation where we could have had a work session and had more of our discussion and other people could hear that? And so that's my question is, what?
I would say no, because there already was a work session last year on the very topic.
Okay.
And the reason that came up the way it did is that we have to be sure that the staff is working on things that the trustees want them to work on. So to have had another work session for something the town hadn't even wanted to sell, it already was a huge staff
Yeah.
input for this, and that's where I come in. I say, wait a minute, this is an issue that will take the staff quite a bit of time. So the staff can't decide that for themselves. The trustees have to give direction as to what the staff should be working on. And if they're asked, if the trustees ask the staff to do something, oftentimes something else has to be set aside. Because as you all know, and I've said, I'm really protective of the staff because there's so many big, expensive projects going on that cannot fail. That I'm really protective of not asking them to do much more than I know they can do while they're also running the daily activities of the town. So that's why I know a work session would not have been a good idea, because what they were proposing wasn't something that the town had asked for. So it would have just been more time.
And that's, I mean, and that's really helpful to put it in that context.
Yeah.
And also part of it, I just wanted to understand, and I also want to say, I really appreciate your, playing that role and protecting staff on that. So no, I'm not, no qualms about that at all.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody necessarily understands that.
Yeah,
And I don't know
that's-
everything going on in the town, honestly. I'm not in there every day. I don't have an office in town.
Right.
But I come in and do meetings, but I'm kind of, I consider myself kind of be the gatekeeper of what comes to the trustees.
Well, and the other issue, and to speak to that, Madam Mayor, is if there's something that kind of needs to be decided or someone's asked you, and that's a good example. I mean, I'm not getting into the substance of the example, but if a citizen group asks the town to consider something, the staff puts it on the agenda, having a work session, it will not come to any sort of decision. You can't, it's just like an executive session, you're not going to make and give staff direction in in a work session, especially if it's especially something like that where they're asking the board to make a formal decision. And so there's certain things, as you go through this where you're like, okay, well, this makes sense. Is this a good use, as the mayor puts it, of staff time, or is this something that we just need to get to an agenda item for discussion and actual decision? Because just talking about it without being able to make decisions is just fruitless and wasting everybody's time. And so,
And we had a work session on the budget, which, so I have experience in that, and it's not about decision making, it's about sharing and understanding and stuff. But I think, being a newcomer on this without the history, I guess I'll just put it out there. It's like, how do we make sure that all the trustees understand why we are or aren't?
And the only way they can understand has to be what is put in front of the public. Because this is the other thing that's really important. You cannot I can't talk to Karen about Twin Lakes. And then if you're elected, I can't turn around and talk to you about Twin Lakes. That's called a chain meeting. More than two trustees cannot speak on the same topic outside of a public meeting. And that is why our agenda packets can be as large as they are, because the decisions that are made by this team has to all be done in public. The public needs to see exactly the same thing you're all seeing. And that's why nobody can be sure that every question has been answered in the content of the agenda packet. But we try to get as much in there as we can, but that's where more questions. That's where the trustees can ask questions, because you may know something that the staff didn't know and you can ask a question on it, but it all has to be in public. Karen could ask me questions on Twin Lakes, but she couldn't share the answers with anyone else. But you can ask about questions in Twin Lakes in a public meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the point. It has to be so transparent. We don't want anyone thinking that either the trustees come ready, have already decided how they're going to vote, or that there's little separate meetings going on behind the scenes. And I'm really sensitive to that because the town was embezzled,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
so there's a lot of distrust.
There
It's
is.
still lingering, and we really are working hard to ensure that we are doing everything transparent. all the budget's transparent. What's on the agenda packet is what we talk about. So that's my soapbox. So that's why they might be, the agenda packets are big. But what you can do when you get an agenda packet, or if you have a question, you can go ask Stefan. You can all go ask Stefan the same question.
And that's okay.
And that's okay because he's not an elected official and he's not voting.
Okay,
But your questions
and
can
then we
help.
could share that information back,
Or-
with another trustee.
No, only one.
Okay.
You also could send an email to Stefan and he could share that email with us. If he seems deems it appropriate,
Okay,
but we can't share an email amongst ourselves.
Okay.
That's really important.
yes, I'm
Yeah.
on board with you.
And I'm gonna fix another wrench in it. Because I serve on the planning commission, right? That then becomes a problem for ex parte or serial meetings. So there are some things where I could have ex parte communication, and so I've got to avoid some of that.
So it would be a question to Dina or Sam.
Correct. Dina or Sam, you know.
One of the things that
Yeah.
I on every single decision I make, how is this gonna affect the town long term? You know, what's it gonna do to the town 5 years down the line or 25 years down the line? Because I see so many decisions that were made in the past that are biting us now, we're biting it, and you need to take that historical perspective. And sometimes it makes decisions very difficult. It really does. I struggle with a lot of decisions I make. And you have to consider that too. And so
It's hard to
a
be
big deal.
objective.
It's very hard at times, yes.
Yeah.
But you also have to put aside as much as you can, your personal biases and do the best job you possibly can.
I agree
Yeah.
wholeheartedly. No personal agendas belong here
No.
Right.
at all.
Absolutely.
We are
It's a-
for the people.
Yeah, and it's
We
a
are
team.
team
It's
effort.
it's a group effort. So,
Yes,
and yeah, so.
indeed.
Okay.
And so I don't think we'll talk about it necessarily, but, and Sam, if you would email this to the other candidates that aren't here at the meeting. What this is, I have to say trustee Hunter, to her credit, thought we need a way for people to understand the relationship of the citizens to the board of trustees, how I interact
Yeah.
with the trustees and the administration, and then how the administration come in. What is their role in how we govern in the town? And it's written as if it's a business. Think about this. This is what is the analog to what it's like to be in a business. And so we just made a copy of what Lucy had kind of put together because I thought it was really helpful because it's hard to describe. So this is here, and we'll email it to everybody that's on online, just as a little, it's like a little primer.
And
And I don't know,
I'll send that PowerPoint to Sam.
yeah, and that'd be great, Clay.
I'll get both of those out to you guys tomorrow. I'm not gonna do it tonight. I hope.
Okay, and I mean, anything else?
I do have a couple things, so, Cal Rose, and if Haley Foster is listening as well, I have spiral bound budget books that also include our financial policies, our strategic plan, and our capital improvement plan, that are ready for you. As well, so everyone that is here has received one. So I just want to make sure.
Take a break. I took a drink of my water and I didn't see there was a box elder bug. So I got a chunk. And it's still alive. It'll let it go outside.
So we do, but I do want to let you know, we have budget books for you, and you know, that has all of our information. We do have a box seller bug problem. Which means there's something.
In this town, it's in this town.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of.
Spray it.
We'll have to check my hair for me because I'm freaking out. That's it.
Pretty good. Up there.
Okay.
Is that all you had?
That's all I have, sorry. But as a candidate, if, what I would ask is that if you're hearing things on your campaign trail, if you've got questions that come up from people, ask me, right? Don't just assume or, let me know and I can tell you if, I can give you some information.
Stefan's your best resource and Sam too. Ask, they'll tell you. They don't have an
That
agenda.
goes for you too.
Yeah, and that's the candidate thing I don't bring up, but
Hang on, Clay.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Clay.
Oh, sorry. I can't tell exactly what's going on in the room.
I know.
The candidate thing's interesting because you get vote you want to get votes so that you can be voted in as a trustee and you can make a difference. It's totally understandable, and I'm completely objective in my interpretation and advice to the board as far as statutes and how it should be applied and what our law says, even if it's, I often will tell staff that they're right, and I'll sometimes tell staff like I disagree, and this is why. And the staff is all very objective too, in my opinion. I've never seen a staff member have an agenda that they're like, I want to do this. They are truly trying to apply the law as it exists in the situation that they find themselves. That said, being a candidate is very interesting because if you go back to our discussion on bias during your what I've seen happen as well is like during a speech or something you put into a paper, about yourself or how you're gonna be different or run the town different or whatever the case may be, you might say something like, and there will never be a new pipe ever to go through the downtown of Peonia, whatever it is. Well, guess what? Guess who just conflicted themselves out of a discussion on utilities on Main Street Peonia because you just shown bias. So you can't undo that. So just be careful when campaigning not to promise a specific thing, because when if and when that specific thing comes up, you will have to recuse, because if it's a public hearing or quasi judicial matter, then you've just conflicted yourself out of that issue. So that's my fair warning during campaign season. That happens a lot with rezoning, right? Where if there's a rezone ongoing and or it's coming, and you say that will never be a commercial, or that residential will never be, or that commercial will never be whatever, and then that comes in front of the board, you can't vote on it, or you shouldn't, or you could ruin the whole thing, right? So just be careful. Obviously it's much different, I think, than what a lot of people think at the outset, but again, very fulfilling. Just be careful promising something that you're not even going to be allowed to vote on.
Can I bring up one more thing, and Clay, I want you to weigh in on it as well. As a trustee, you can go and talk with people, right? You can, and especially when it's about decisions that have been made, but you can present fact. And in fact, I would ask that you guys do that more. Hey, this is this decision that was made, and here's what we factored in with our decision. And Clay talked a little bit about meeting with them, and then if they want to turn the conversation to the rezoning that's going to happen, that it's going to be before you, you have to say, hey, I can't talk about that, but here's what we talked about in our last meeting, right? You can do those kinds of things, and then, if somebody says, hey, I have a question about, dogs off leash, which is a problem, take that back and bring it to, or Matt, right, our police chief. Those are the things that we want to hear. We want to, we are doing our best to be out, just like you guys are. I live in a very prominent part of town. My house, for whatever reason, Google listed as town hall, so people. And it's funny on camera, because a lot of, you'll hear Autumn like, this is not town hall.
Did you hear that, Austin?
Oh, God. She's made some complaints. So, but, you know, if you hear those things, you know, even though we're trying to be out in the public, out and hearing them, you know, we can't be everywhere. So if you hear something, like, maybe you do serve on a board, maybe you are with the Creative Coalition or the Conservation Center, and you're hearing things that they have issues with, bring them back to us so we know what's going on. Or maybe there's an opportunity for us to coordinate with, you know, the Learning Council on a grant opportunity or something. I don't know. There are some things that I might just not know about, so.
I would piggyback on that if it's okay, just to let you know, we have a very either or polarity with town employees to where we either have people who are very involved with social media or we have people that we won't have anything to do with. Like myself, I don't belong to a single message board nowhere in the state, just because I know I have to be careful. Like right now, it's election season, I'm an election official, you know, and I get really mad when something's wrong and I can't set it straight and stuff. So for my own sanity and honestly for my house's peacefulness, 'cause my husband doesn't appreciate me bringing work home, I don't belong to even the boards of my own community. You know, so there may be the upside to that is I'm a much happier person. The downside is I don't know about this really cool community event that's coming up that, hey, maybe we should be getting that on a website, or this issue that's come up that everybody's talking about. You know, I'm only gonna hear about that from one of you guys, or if somebody actually writes an email to town hall or calls, and that doesn't always happen. People have these whole conversations about stuff and we don't hear a word about it here. So it's another thing when you're bringing it back to us. In some cases, it's like mine, it may be the first time hearing about it.
And there could be a policy change that comes from it.
Right.
And that's a lot of the policy comes from the citizens.
Right.
It's saying we need to look at this differently. It's like, oh, okay, so. That's,
And we started doing that when we're making ordinance changes, not resolutions, but ordinance changes. We put a sponsored by, so there might be two trustees who, you know, want to sponsor that policy change through an ordinance. And their names will go at the top of that, you know, hey, we're sponsoring this.
so they could be asked questions.
That's right.
And one of the biggest things about being a trustee is we make policy. We don't run the town.
Right,
We
staff
don't-
runs the
yeah,
town.
Let's just made the decision to go to a town administrator.
Right. And it's, let me tell you, having been in the situation where we didn't have a town manager and now having a town manager, life is a whole lot better.
I imagine it is a lot smoother in a lot of arenas.
Life gets much better.
Yeah, because the trustees can't direct work with staff.
And it takes your whole life up. I remember budget season when we didn't have a town manager back in the day, and it was horrendous. We had meetings virtually every week and they went on for 5-6 hours.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, so I am very appreciative of staff.
Yes.
Sam and Stefan and everyone else, yeah.
Everyone else.
Mhm.
We should have been having a good relationship with our board too. That was something we were all just recently talking about. And trust me, don't think for a single second that any of us agree with each other hardly ever. 'Cause we don't. But we have a good working relationship. So when the decision finally gets made, there's probably not a whole lot of arguments that haven't come up and sides that haven't been looked at, because we all have very strong opinions.
I'll defend staff to, you know, staff time to a point, but then I'll also say some things like, you're not gonna require porta potties for special events in the park. And I. We have working bathrooms, you're not gonna force that cost on someone.
Yeah, but that's because you're administration and you know. We don't know everything going on in town. It's not our job. So we rely on the staff to tell us what's going on, and then we say, well, we've been hearing this, so we'd like you to look into that. So it's a very much a cross thing.
But people will come to you guys and never come to us.
Yeah.
And they're coming to you because you're their elected representative, and we may not even know there's a problem, or be like, oh, we never knew something like that would happen, how can we fix it?
Lot of conversations about Twin Lakes this week, which has been really good, you know, and people want to understand.
It's an issue. It's.
Did they read the op-ed?
They were asked, I said there is, and they're,
Exactly.
but yeah, it's
Still
still,
places.
they're still trying to figure out where it is, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Let's go.
Question, reminder, when is the candidates forum, and is that something that's gonna be?
It's gonna be here.
And watch it remotely, or it's just in person?
Oh, no, I do believe DCI will be streaming it. It's being held here at Town Hall. But we are not in charge of it at all, other than giving them a space to do it. I remember I watched it last year in my office, even though I was in the same building, and we weren't the ones streaming it, so I'm pretty sure they stream it. But you're more than welcome. I'm pretty sure you can come in person too.
And when is it?
It's the sixth,
Friday at what time?
seven P.M.
And they're usually really good about keeping things on task and on time, so it doesn't go
Yeah.
super long, so.
And so we have all three candidates? It's just for.
Actually.
It's for all candidates.
Six candidates.
Oh, right.
Not city
Yeah.
trustees, but candidates. I won't be there because I'll be out of town.
Yeah.
I will be there.
Great. No, it was good when I did it. It was really good. They do questions and.
Sorry.
No, even though she was running anyway, so she felt that it was important. People to hear how she felt. Oh, yeah. People hear answers. Do it, man.
Under 2 minutes.
And you know that, it's been 2 years, so I forgot. That's good.
No, it's like the process that I haven't.
No, I hadn't either.
All the ways.
But I'm like, I
So, because I was talking about
materials over here.
Yes, oh, yes,
yeah.
So